What's up, guys? David Baye here alongside IFBB Pro Hall of Famer Shawn Ray. First part of our Olympia preview series brought to you by S-Force. Shawn, first time, I think, since about 1998 where we've seen an Olympia competition where it's really been an open field. For so many years, we saw Lee Haney, Dorian, and in recent years, we've had favorites. We're coming into the 2019 Olympia. Field looks like, I don't want to say wide open, but it's up for grabs. How do you see things playing out this year?
Well, first, how do you like the headphones?
They're beautiful. They go nice. They go nice.
You got way more trophies in your backdrop than I do. How much do those things cost?
Man, yeah, but here's the one thing you'll notice about my trophies. You have one trophy, but I believe that's an Arnold Classic trophy. Mine are... I got a couple Mr. Wisconsins back there.
I saw that at the swap meet in Wisconsin in Oshkosh one year. You got it. Nice. I love it.
You got to be busting my balls right away. Those are my Mr. Wisconsin ones back there, man. So
pretty good. Nice collection. Anyways, the Olympia, 55 years were going on. I just happened to be 55. Me and Bob Chick, born in the year of the Olympia, where the original Larry Scott won it. And of course, I like to start at the beginning. So for those newbies out there that don't know the history, started in 65, Larry Scott won the first two, and of course the Cuban, Sergio Oliva, won the next three up to 1969, and then the Austrian Oak, Arnold Schwarzenegger, came from 70 to 75 and rattled off 6 championships. 76 and 76, it was Franco Columbu, and then we had Frank Zane, 77, 78, 79. Arnold comes out of retirement, walks into the Olympia in 1980 in Sydney and wins his 7th and final Olympia. People say it was controversial. We'll get to that. I don't know. I mean, because Chris Dickerson was second, and I never saw Chris Dickerson beating Arnold Schwarzenegger on a bad day. But that's neither here nor there, because eventually Franco Columbu would win it in 81, and Chris Dickerson would come to win it in 1992, which I thought Samir New should have actually won in 82. But Samir won it in 1983, and of course then it was Lee Haney the year I graduated in 84, rattling off 8 consecutive victories. I was there for the retirement party in 1991. Where we saw Dorian Yates get second, and then he went from 92 to 97, won 6 in a row, several controversial ones, I might add.
1994 being one of those?
And then it was wide open, like you said, in 98. And, of course, Ronnie Coleman leapfrogged from the back of the pack from 9th to 1st, rattled off 8 championships. I chose to give up and throw in my hat. I didn't want to be there for the retirement party in 2001. He would win 4 more times before he had ultimately succumbed to Jay Cutler. And then Jay Cutler would rattle off 3 championships, and then he would lose in 2008 to Dexter the Blade Jackson, recapture the title in 2009. And of course, he was upset by his upstart protege Phil Heath in 2010.
2011.
2011.
Yeah, Jay was 07. Yeah. Jay was 06 and 07. Dexter was 08. Jay in 9 and 10. Then Phil came around in 11.
Correct. And then in 11, Phil would rattle off 7, and then he would get beat a year ago by Sean Roden. And, of course, now that title is up for vacancy based on his circumstance, and we're at a very impressive time. And mind you, I was there for the same situation all the way back in 92, because remember, Lee Haney retired in 91, so it was open, just like it is right now with the suspension of Sean Roden. And so it does make for an exciting competition, because we know everyone on that stage has taken turn beating everybody. And Dexter, at 49 years old, has won the most competitions and is the most decorated bodybuilder. Winning the Tampa Pro, I'm sure, gave him a lot more sense of security. I would say, as an elder statesman, being in the Olympia 20 years now, he's got to be feeling pretty confident about the fact that he's beaten these guys before. Maybe he could pull a rabbit out of his hat coming from 7th place last year. I did a video talking about Brandon Curry, who's got to be cocksure of his ability to actually win this show, since he beat everyone at the Arnold Classic, with the exception of Dexter being in that lineup. But we go back a little bit. He beat Dexter last year in the
Olympia. Yeah.
So Brandon's got to be pretty cocksure about the ability to win this contest, knowing that Phil and Sean and Big Ramy aren't there, even though he beat Big Ramy last year. And we got a glimpse of Big Ramy over the weekend, looking every bit like he's ready for the Mr. Olympia, but he didn't qualify.
He didn't qualify. Yeah, it's kind of confusing some fans. He looks like I don't know that I saw from the pictures I saw that he looks like he's quite 3 weeks out, but he definitely looks like he's in full prep mode for whatever show it might be that he's getting ready for.
Could be trying to qualify early by winning the Romanian championships, November 2nd, 3rd. If he does that, that's how Max Charles got in this year, I should say. Go to Romania, qualify early, and then you have the whole year off for next year to come in and try to battle for the title. That could be Rami's plan. Nonetheless, the guys that are qualified, William Bonac, you got to tell, he's another guy that's got to be very confident about his chances because he beat these guys at the Arnold Classic a year ago. He won the Arnold Classic over in Australia. And he doesn't fear any of these guys because he's beaten them all before, including Dexter Jackson. So
Correct.
he's got to be very, very confident. And Rolly Winkler, 3rd place a year ago, beat Brandon Curry in the Mr. Olympia head-to-head competition and beat William Bonac, and he beat Dexter Jackson. So the playing field right now has got to be looking pretty good for those guys. And I felt the same way in 92 going up against Dorian Yates. Mind you, in 91 I was 5th place, and I was off. I won the Arnold Classic that year with this. Can you see it?
I can see it. No, nobody's missing your Arnold Classic trophy.
You were born,
right
David, in 1991. Well, the year you were born, back in 91.
A few years before that, but
I was killing it over here with this 75-pound trophy. But I thought in 91, by winning the Arnold, that maybe I was going to be Mr. Olympia. I mean, that's what winning does for you. It reinvigorates you. But the responsibility of being the Arnold Classic champion in March, I ran out of gas by September. And I wound up in 5th place and got beat by a few guys that probably shouldn't have beat me. I didn't think Labrada and I didn't think Vince Taylor were going to beat me. Nonetheless, none of us saw Dorian Yates coming in 1991. So 92, with it being wide open, I think we all took it up another level. And it was a race to this contest. And like these guys are racing towards this year's Mr. Olympia, myself, Kevin, Flex, and Nasser, we all probably felt the same way in 1998. And then Ronnie Coleman leapfrogged over us. There could be a dark horse in this race that we're not talking about. Things can happen. Guys can over-diet, become overstressed, and become over-consumed with the process and cheat on their diets. A guy like Cedric McMillan, who we've written off every time the Olympia comes because he's just a promise that's not fulfilled in September, he could maybe dial it in, realizing there's a special invite. And with a straight run-up, he might come in and be that Cedric McMillan that we've always wanted because he's not standing next to Phil Heath as the yard marker, because he doesn't have Big Ramy as the other big man in the show. And he towers over these guys in height.
Absolutely.
He's going to stand neck and neck with him, which is what brings us back to Lee Haney when he first arrived on the scene in 83 and got 3rd. By 84, he was just so much taller and so much bigger and had that taper that he can make these other good guys look small. So Cedric could be Ronnie Coleman of 1998. I'm not going to rule that out.
Now, do you think coming into this Olympia, because again, when we go back the history of the Olympia, and we're not just going back 20 years, I mean, we go way back. Again, for the most part, we've had a front runner coming into every Olympia, so guys are chasing these guys. There's that old adage, you have to knock out the champ to win, so by default...
I hated it.
Yeah, I know, right? By default,
you know how much money that's cost me? That adage has cost me a small portion.
You got to knock out the champ. But in any regard, I have to imagine these guys are getting ready for the Olympia with a little bit more fire under their butt, knowing that they're not necessarily chasing a front runner anymore. I mean, granted, you have some favorites, but do you think the guys getting ready for the Olympia knowing there's not a Phil Heath who by default is going to be in the lead, or the returning Mr. Olympia from last year, does that light an extra fire under their butt or make it burn a little bit brighter?
I can tell you I was there twice, and all I can speak on is personal experience in 1992 and 1998. Both of those years very memorable for me because Kevin Levrone made his Olympia debut in 1992 and wound up in 2nd place. And, of course, Ronnie Coleman shocked the world, like Mike Tyson getting knocked out by Buster Douglas in 1990. We all ramped it up a little bit. In 92, I over-dieted. I wanted to come in shredded and peeled by comparison to 91, and I think I made a huge leaps and jumps in terms of condition in Helsinki, Finland, but at the sacrifice, I think, of a little bit of fullness that I would have needed to go up against Dorian. And Dorian even said, by comparison from 91 to 92, he over-dieted trying to get lean because he didn't have to go up against the size of a Lee Haney, so he figured I need to come in shredded to beat these guys like Shawn Ray and Labrada and Vince Taylor, Mohammed Benaziza, much smaller, more conditioned guys, and it worked for him, but he wasn't comfortable. He over-dieted, he was small. It can happen when you see the finish line and you think it could be you. You start trying to do too much. And mind you, they're not out of danger. We're 2 weeks away. And, I remember Dorian tore his biceps 4 weeks out. And he wasn't the same. He still won because we couldn't knock out the champion unless he showed up in a wheelchair. But nonetheless, this is a contest where we could be saying, and the new Mr. Olympia, and there's probably 5 guys that are all worthy of the title.
Now, last year's People's Champion, a new award given out at the Olympia. Mind you, this year's People's Champion actually being sponsored by S-Force, so excited about that. Rocking my age. That's my Aviator Series Warhawk. We'll get you set up.
I like that.
We'll get you set up before the Olympia. I promise.
Nice.
But so Rulli came in last year as the People's Champ. Now he's always been a crowd favorite, just because he's always got a smile on his face. Despite his English not being the best, he's as fun to be around as any competitor there is. But he's got a freak factor, and in a lot of people's opinion, for as big as Ramy is, Rulli's freak factor maybe even just a little bit higher. We saw Rulli noticeably sharper at the Olympia than we've seen him arguably at any show in the past. If Rulli comes in as tight as he did last year, or even a little bit tighter, can he be the Mr. Olympia?
Absolutely. I mean, he beat all these guys. He won the Arnold Classic over in Australia. He's won over in Finland. He's won competitions over in Kuwait. So he's won a lot of shows. I remember he told me, I think he turned pro in 2009, I believe it was, at the Arnold Classic. So he's a 10-year veteran, and he's beaten all these guys. There's no one on that stage that Rolling Winkler has not beaten, which Dexter can lay claim to, which William Bonet can lay claim to, and Brandon Curry can lay claim to. Cedric is the guy that there's a few guys he's not been able to really put in his rearview mirror, because he's beaten a lot of guys throughout the Arnold Classics, but at the Olympia, he's promised that's unkept. So you got to imagine that this is going to be a special contest, even in the absence of certain big names, because someone's got to win. And I've always felt, Dave, people were saying I was too short, too narrow, too this, too that. If I listened to those people, I would have never been in the conversation. I had to get ready and do my job, and then I wound up being a consistent figure in the top 5 because I didn't listen to the people that told me I couldn't do it. I was too small. So there's something to be said for those bodybuilders chugging away, waiting for that opportunity to come. And because they're not being measured against a defending champion, their opportunity can equally arrive at the same time. And it could be splitting hairs. It could come down to the final pose down, and it could come down to splitting hairs. And this is the type of contest we want to see. I don't mind seeing a split decision fight after 12 rounds as long as it was a close, hard-fought fight. I think this is going to be that contest that is going to come down to the wire. And while Dexter may have the inroads on having enough wisdom to peak, does he have enough youth left in the tank in terms of the hamstrings and the thickening of the waist and the lower back? Is he going to be able to suck it up enough one last time and show that he can do it? Father Time's undefeated, but that would be a story of the ages if he won at 49 years old, the same year he's going to turn 50, to be a 2-time Mr. Olympia. That would change the landscape of bodybuilding and the history in his career, of course, because it'd be his 30th win. He's already the winningest pro bodybuilder. But what are you going to say when a guy like Rolly, who came from nothing, who's got an Arnold Classic and has beaten these guys, and suddenly he wins this title? He trains half the year out there in Kuwait as well. A very interesting story. Out in Kuwait, held residency out in Holland, lives out in Curacao. He's a father, and the fan favorite. So there's a story there. And then William Bonek, he fires his mentor and his coach. He's crying on Instagram about his living conditions and the amount of money he's got to pay his coach, and he's got to go it alone. Suddenly, after all this time, he's got to go it alone. Well, maybe he grows up this year and he actually does it on his own, and he also has himself to thank for that, because he made a very hard decision on the road to the Olympia. And man, you want to talk about feeling validated and vindicated. If he should win, he made the right decision to split from his coach. And Brandon Curry, 4 kids, spends half the year over in Kuwait. His wife's over there running her spa out in Tennessee, and trying to keep this juggling act together to go out there and get all the food and send it all back home to Tennessee while he's living out there in Kuwait. Have you been to Kuwait?
I have not. No, one of the few places I haven't been.
There's nothing but dirt. You eat, sleep, and train. That's it. It's like being a soldier at war.
That's what the guys that I've talked to. There's this mystique around Oxygen Gym out there, and it's interesting because the converse of the discussion about how great Oxygen Gym is people said, well, Ronnie Coleman never had an Oxygen Gym, Lee Haney never had an Oxygen Gym. But when you talk to the guys that go out to Oxygen Gym, that is the theme, exactly what you just said. It is bodybuilding boot camp. Eat, sleep, train. So while you don't necessarily need an Oxygen Gym to take things to the next level, it certainly takes out all the distractions that a lot of people have in everyday life and offers these bodybuilders, really an opportunity to have tunnel vision towards that title. Now, all these storylines are really interesting. And I got to say, when we first started talking about the 2019 Olympia and, we found out, hey, Phil Heath might not be coming back. And then there was all this discussion about, Ramey's shoulder. Maybe Ramey's not competing. And then the issues with Shawn Rhoden. Shawn Rhoden's not competing. There was a little bit of a lull, I feel like, for a short period of time, in a very short period of time where everybody was like, oh, the 2019 Olympia, no Phil, no Shawn, no Ramey. And then all these storylines started to build and this excitement started to grow because for so many years, fans, I feel like, were like, we already know who's going to win. Maybe there's a chance.
I lived it.
But this year,
yeah.
Leading into the Olympia, especially these handful of weeks, there seems like there is just a really good buzz. There's a renewed excitement about seeing who the next champion is. Like you said, people love Rulli. They would love to see him win. Bonac is kind of an underdog story, a guy who used to compete in 212, moving up to the Open. Cedric McMillan, a fan favorite. And Dexter, if he were to win the Olympia, I think you'd have an explosion from the crowd of the likes we haven't seen in a very long time.
You're just talking about the people you're talking about the veterans. I mean, there's
that kind of brings me to my next point. Kind of going off of Phil, Ramy, and Shawn. These guys have been in the top 6 for the last how many years? This really opens up the door for some of these other guys to move up into that top 5, top 6, and maybe sneak up a little bit higher. We've got guys like Steve Kuclo. We've got Luke Sando placing 3rd at the Arnold Classic this year, 2nd behind Dexter Jackson in Tampa. We have one of my dark horse picks, Patrick Moore, kind of came out of nowhere. We saw him win the Cal Pro earlier this year and defeat some good guys. So there's definitely some dark horses guys that we might not really have focused on in the past that could work their way up to 4th, 5th, 6th place spot, or even have a Ronnie Coleman year and jump into that title spot.
Well, that's the storyline because we have the upper echelon A-listers, and you got these guys that are still trying to make a name for themselves and have that validation Olympia sticker, that moniker. It's one thing to be at the Olympia. It's another thing to be in the hunt for the money. The hunt for the money is the top 6. That's what the creme de la creme are, right? So you can't forget Nathan Diashe, who's a very accomplished bodybuilder who's overcome some trials and tribulations. You got the Texas Rattlesnake in Steve Kuclo. He's kind of one of those guys that, is a fan favorite. He's got that all-American look.
The Texas Rattlesnake, isn't that Stone Cold Steve Austin?
King Snake.
The King said the Texas Rattlesnake. That's Stone Cold. I'm sure Steve won't mind that. So
when I came up, everybody had a nickname. We had Vince the Prince, the Quiet Storm, Vince Taylor, right? We had Kevin the Maryland Muscle Machine, and Rich Gasparri the Dragon Slayer, and Totally Awesome Lee Haney, and Massive Class Vibrato. We don't have that so much with these new jacks.
But guys, I think Brandon Curry is the prodigy. I think Nathan Diashe is the prophecy. Dexter is the Blade. Steve Kuclo is King Snake. I don't know. Rulli, the Beast.
Oh, Cedric McMillan, I think he calls himself the One.
The One. There you go. William Bonac, I think the Conqueror, obviously. William.
Yeah.
So we got
to get back to that. These guys, we've got to have some guys break out of the pack.
Got some good nicknames.
We got to get one for Occam Williams. I mean, Occam Williams is like a humongous.
He's one of these guys that every show he competes in, there's discussions if he could just nail it. Akeem is just one of these guys where he's just slabs and slabs of beef, and he seems to come in really, really conditioned everywhere except his upper back. So he's one of these guys where he has no weak body parts from a mass standpoint, from a conditioning standpoint. We've seen striated glutes. We've seen the crazy shredded hams and upper body. His upper back always seems to be that spot that comes in a little bit slow, and if he can dial that in, I see him for the qualified list. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I'm not 100% sure that he's prepping. There's so much crazy stuff going on. And
You're talking about Hakeem?
Yeah, no disrespect
I talked to him. He's going to be doing it. I saw him. And
He's
so is
been
Max
kind of
Charles.
quiet for a little while.
Max Charles is Haitian. I think Hakeem Williams is Trinidad.
Yeah.
Because I think I asked him who's the best bodybuilder out of Trinidad. He said Darren Charles. I think he's Trinidad. But nonetheless, those guys, they're competing against each other too. So don't get it twisted. Not everybody is going to the Mr. Olympia thinking they're going to be the next Mr. Olympia. Okay, some guys are just trying to make those small, realistic climb up from the back of the pack.
Well, for a lot of these guys, I mean, I would have to imagine for a lot of these guys, some of the guys that you've listed, Hakeem Williams, John De La Rosa, you have a couple other guys, Lucas Osladil. I mean, for these guys, I got to imagine, even Luke Sandow, just getting into that top 10 at the Olympia, the top 10, the Mr. Olympia, that's got to be a gigantic accomplishment in and of itself.
I got to tell you, for my first Olympia, I remember going in, there's 24 guys, and I thought, man, if I can just beat Albert Beckles. I was like 22 years old. This is 1988.
How old was Albert in 88?
Albert Beckles in 85 was second place at 46 years old. So by 88, he was, 47, 48, 49. He was Dexter's age, right? And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like 22 years old. I got to get Albert Beckles. If I can just beat Albert Beckles, how can he beat me? I'm so young and so raw. And, of course, I went in the contest. Then I was Robbie Robinson. I beat Albert Beckles. I beat Robbie Robinson. I'm like, Samir Banu. I got a Tony, all these other bodybuilders. I kind of lowered my expectation because I knew I was off. But if I could beat some of these legendary bodybuilders, it would give me something to walk out with my medal around my neck and feel like I did something. I wound up in 13th place, so I beat half the guys that were in the show. And I was happy with that. So I know that for some of these bodybuilders, they're not going to the Olympia with any grand illusions of winning. They're going in, I got to beat Nathan Diasha, I got to beat Max Charles, or Hakeem Williams is saying, I got to so they can make a name for themselves, and gradually they may move up, their equity in terms of making appearances. I'm top 10 in the world, or I'm a top 6 bodybuilder on the Olympia stage, and it works for their sponsors, it works for their fan base, it works for their social media, and it validates what they're doing. Like, look, man, I couldn't beat this guy earlier in the year at the Arnold or in the New York Pro, but I got him at the Olympia where it counted the most. Some of those guys would love to take out a veteran like Cedric McMillan on the big show, or catch one of those A-listers sleeping. But listen, who had Dexter 7th going into last year's Mr. Olympia? I didn't.
Nobody.
He was like a perennial top 5 guy for a decade.
Nobody did. And I don't think a lot of people had Rulli. I think people have always known that Rulli has had the potential to go that high, but I think, he really surprised people. I don't think anybody really necessarily had him placing that high. Potential there, obviously, but, potential is a word, again, I keep coming back to Cedric McMillan. I think Cedric's got the potential to beat everybody on that stage. He's got the frame, he's got the muscularity, beautiful.
You've been saying it for a decade.
Right, since he turned pro in 2007, he's been the guy where if he really nailed it, he could be Mr. Olympia. And with that vacancy for that top spot, maybe this is his year. And I think the fans are excited to see if it could be, if it's not Cedric, maybe Dexter again. There's
a lot of storylines, and if nothing else, even on the 212 division, it's vacant. I mean, if you can't get excited about the smaller guys, what are you going to get excited about? I mean, you got Eduardo Correa, you got Derek Lunsford coming, you got Sean Clarita, the Giant Killer. I mean, this is a contest that any of these guys could win too. So that's sometimes more competitive because the playing field's level. You don't have this big disparity in height and weight. These guys are all, relatively smaller and typically in even better condition than some of our open guys. So that's a storyline Friday night, because the last name you hear Friday night is going to be the crowning of a new 212 champion, which has never happened before. Right. So that's a huge step for them, because their show's now not spread out over 2 days. They can actually watch and witness the Open Olympia on Saturday, because they're going to be 100% done on Friday. That's exciting. I interviewed Ashley Kaltwasser. She's won 3 bikini contests, and I know you love watching the bikini, and you're an expert on that. You're a podiologist. I know you like to watch that show.
A bootyologist.
She's won 3 Miss Bikini championships. If she wins again, she'll stand alone as the only 4-time bikini Olympia winner. And Angelica Teixeira, if she wins, she'll tie her with 3. So there's a storyline in the bikini side, and of course the women's physique. I mean, you know a little bit more about the women's physique than I do because you've been following that a lot closer. But what's the girl's name? Shanique Grant?
Shanique Grant, yeah. But yeah, so not to get too much into that, because that we are actually going to cover in some of our upcoming videos leading into Olympia weekend. So we're going to just kind of want to focus on our open division here tonight with some of the biggest names in bodybuilding, but we're going to be coming back again, talking 212, talking classic physique. Speaking of 212, Shawn, how many Olympia 212 titles would you have won if they had 212 in your day?
I would want them all. I mean, listen, that's not to brag. I'm just not to brag. Listen.
I mean, how many in a row? 10, 12, 15?
Well, let's be real. I mean, I didn't get Lee Labrada's number and actually take him out in front with the judges' approval until 1993. So Lee Labrada and I were going back and forth, and he held me at bay till 93, and then I retired him in 94, right? So from that point on,
I retired him.
From that point on,
classic Shawn Ray.
From that point on, I'm undefeated. I mean, until from 93 to 2001, how many years is that? 8 years? There was no 212-pound bodybuilder that beat me. I mean, Labrada was my guy, and once I took him out and retired him, if we want to say that, then I would have won 8 before I would have retired, because it would have been from 93 all the way to 2001. That being said, because I was taking out the bigger bodybuilders and because the paychecks were larger in the open category, I would have never tried to win the 212. It wasn't something I wanted to be. I wanted to be Mr. Olympia, which is why I think James Flex Lewis made a mistake taking a year off, because suddenly you lose that championship training and you get domesticated. He had his kid, he's got his gym, he's got his obligations to his sponsors. It's really hard when you back off and then suddenly you want to come back and do it all over again. Had he not taken his foot off the gas and made it a declaration last year that, hey, I've won 7, there's nowhere for me to go here, I'm going to go to the next level. If he was in this open competition, he would be part of that conversation.
Absolutely.
In his first year as a top 5 guy, potentially a top 3 guy. I don't say that he has the goods to win it, but he could have came out and been in the top 3 this year had he stayed the course. You could not discount what he brought to the stage in the 212 division. But for me, I would have never done the 212 because I knew that there was a big gap between me and the next smaller guy, and I don't really know who that would have been. In 94, right? I got second in 94. Who was the next small guy like myself? I don't even know that there were any other small guys to compare me with. Ben Aziza was gone. He passed away in 92. Steve Risborough, for the Canadian guy, was gone. So there was really no one there that we were looking at. When I came up, we had Lee Labrada, and we had some other smaller guys that we can kind of look at. But then it was just me and the Giants.
Shawn and the Giants.
It was me and the Giants, and I love to slay the Giants, man. I didn't have to win. I had a good time at 212 knocking those other big fools out and having some bragging rights. You should have saw Paul Dillette's face when I used to beat him in a competition, or Chris Cormier when I used to beat him up on stage, and the look on Kevin Avroni's face when he would get beat by me was priceless. So why would I want to do the 212 and win?
We're gonna have to get you back and just hear some old school stories. That's what we need to do. Story time with Shawn Ray. Story time. Not talking modern bodybuilding. Not talking who took first or second. Just story time. But Shawn, we appreciate your time once again. First of a handful of video series coming up. Brought to you by S-Force. S-Force, one of the official sponsors of the 2019 Olympia. I know they're excited to be on board. They are the presenting sponsor for that People's Award. So another exciting move for S-Force moving into the 2019 Olympia. They're going to have a booth set up. You guys are all going to be able to come out, check out their new products, see what they look like in person. So some exciting stuff coming up. But once again, Shawn, Really appreciate your time. I know I'll be seeing you in Las Vegas in just a few
Absolutely,
weeks.
congratulations. I know that you're going to be the host for the Amateur Olympia, correct? Did
I
you get
will
that
be,
settled?
I'll be the amateur
Starting
Olympia
Wednesday.
official MC on Wednesday and Thursday.
And Thursday.
So
Women's
exciting.
Wednesday, men's Thursday, right?
Yes, correct. And then I'll be joining you on the rest of the weekend doing some work for Muscle and Fitness. We see your backdrop there. So an exciting weekend for me all around. Some big stuff for S-Force, Amateur Olympia emceeing, some work for Muscle and Fitness.
The press conference Thursday, meet the Olympians Thursday night, and then prejudging Fridays. And also Wings of Strength is bringing back the reunion of legends and champions.
It's
with all the past Olympia winners and the current women Wings of Strength women.
Yeah,
winners.
a big weekend. Big shout out to Dan Solomon, the Chief Operations Officer of the Olympia this year, doing big things. Once again, huge buzz for the 2019 Olympian. We're going to find out how it plays out in just a few short weeks. Once
Get your
again,
tickets at
get your tickets, MrOlympia.com. We know the VIP packages are already sold out, and I just saw some guys talking about it online the other day. Look, there's going to be tickets available when you get there. So for the people going to Vegas looking to buy tickets, you will be able to get tickets. But as we found out from some of the guys talking about it the other day, some of those closer up seats, some of the lower seats in the bowl around the arena, towards the side of the stage, those are moving fast. Get your tickets now. Again, if you've got your flights booked and everything like that, you're not sure what your ticket situation, you will be able to get them at the box off. But as always, you're better off getting them ahead of time. You can get them on MrOlympia.com.
And one other thing, Dave, for the new Jacks coming for the very first time, the Mr. Olympia is at the Orleans Arena, which is attached to the Orleans Host Hotel. The actual expo Friday and Saturday is across town at the Las Vegas Convention Center, and those tickets you get at the door.
At the door at the convention center.
And there's usually some long lines, so you want to get there early, and there's a ton of prejudging on the pro circuit that takes place in the expo. I'm not sure which exact events, but a lot of pro prejudging takes place in there, along with some other stuff going on with all the sponsors.
Yeah, so an exciting weekend in Las Vegas as always, both at the Orleans, at the convention center, a ton of stuff going on. So.
And it is webcast. By the way, Digital Muscle is the webcast, and it's being brought to you by Muscle Farm and someone else. I just don't remember.
Nice work, Sean.
Oh, I got it. iHerb and Muscle Farm.
iHerb and Muscle Farm bringing you that webcast. So anyhow, Sean, once again, appreciate your time, guys. That's going to do it for us for the first in the series of our Olympia previews brought to you by S-Force. We're gonna do that. We're gonna do that on camera. Like, hey man, I'm a few years younger, but anyhow, appreciate the time, Sean. Catch up with you guys next time.
Peace.